In order to know that your SQL servers are actually running properly, you have to know that those services that SQL Server relies on are actually running or not running as you desire. To handle that, PowerShell has a nifty little command called get service, and you can find the status of any service running on a server. Another cool thing about PowerShell is its ability to do remoting and actually reach out to other servers and see what their service's status is. Now, here in the recording studio, I only have one computer. But in a real-world enterprise type situation, you're probably going to be managing hundreds of computers. And you're probably going to put all those computer names into an array so that, assuming of course you have all the proper credentials and remoting set up correctly, you can just cycle through all the machines and bring back the service status for all of the SQL servers that you're talking to. So we're going to fake that by just putting the name of the machine I'm using into a machine's variable. We're going to be doing that throughout this course so that I can show you what the real-world code would look like in an enterprise-type situation. So that's what this very first line does, is it just loads up a machine's variable with the name of the machine I'm working with. Then we come down, and what we're going to do for this is we're going to use the get service, and we're going to put all of those services into a hash table. So to load up each one, I really need to have an empty hash table to start with. And that's what this next line does. The @ sign with those empty squiggly brackets just creates us an empty hash table. We then enter a for each loop where we're going to get each machine out of our array of machines. Next, we finally get to call the heart of this whole operation, which is the get service commandlet. To use it, you have to pass in several parameters. Here, we're going to pass in the name of the services that we want to get. Wildcards are allowed. So what you see here for the dash name property, we're going to have *SQL*, which is going to ensure that we get any service that has SQL in the name. The next thing we pass in is the name of the computer we want to discover these services for. Now the last parameter may look a little odd to you. Error action silently continue? Well, here's the deal. If get service has an error and you don't specify silently continue, then the commandlet just brings everything to a crashing halt. It throws that big ugly red error message on the screen and nothing else happens. For a real scripting situation, you would want to actually use error handling within this loop to trap when an error occurs. Error action silently continue will actually throw that error and let you catch it. If you want to learn more about how to do error handling within PowerShell, you can go back and watch the Intro to PowerShell class available on the Pluralsight website. Now, get service returns a collection of service objects. What we want to do is we want to sort those by the display name so that you can quickly find the services that you want to check. So to do that, we're going to pass that collection of service objects through the sort object commandlet, and we're going to sort by the display name. Now we're going to take that and pass it into a for each loop. Remember that we've got multiple services in here, and this is going to let us load each one of those individually into our hash table. The first thing I want to do is set up the key for the hash table, and that's going to be loaded into the $k variable. And we're going to use the name of the machine because hopefully we're loading this with many machines. And then I'm going to use just a dash. You could use anything you wanted to here. And then I'm going to use the display name of the service. The next thing I want to do is get the status, and that's going to go in the value for my hash table. So I'm just going to access the status property of the current service object and put it into the v variable. And then finally I add it to my hash table by using the name of the hash table, brackets, and the key, and setting it equal to the value. Now, next you may be scratching your head going, why are we calling get service again? Didn't we just do that? Well, services can have other services that are dependent upon them. And we want to find out what the values for those are. So we're going to take the name of the current service and we're going to pipe it through a select object. And what we want to do is we're going to use the expand property service dependent on. And what that's going to do is it's going to return another collection of service objects. And this collection of service objects will be dependent upon the service object that we passed in from the parent. So now we have another for each loop, and it pretty much does the same thing, adding that dependent service plus its status to the hash table. And that's what these lines down here do. And you'll note here I added a little descriptive text so that we would know which of these services had a dependency. Finally, we just close out our various loops, and let's run this. Alright, we've executed the code and we've now loaded up the hash table. So let's take a look and see what we got back. We're just going to take that hash table and throw it through the format table commandlet. And you can see here we've got the name of each one of our services. You can see at the top our two agents are stopped for the two instances of SQL Server I have. You can see that the third one has a dependency on SQL Server and it's actually running. And here's the rest of my services and their values. So let's come back up here. And now let's say I want to sort these. I want to see the stopped ones at the top and I want to see the running ones at the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call the service status again, but this time I need to specify the get enumerator so it will throw each object through the pipe. And now we're going to use sort object to sort on the value, and then we're going to auto size the table again. And now you can see all the stopped ones are at the top and the running ones are at the bottom. Well, maybe I want to go one step further. Maybe I only want to see the services that have stopped. Well, that's easy enough to do. We'll just use where object commandlet. And we'll run that. And now you can see I'm only showing the ones that have stopped running. Well, let's say in our environment we decide, you know what, we don't want the agent running on the boxes that we're checking. Well, okay, we can further limit our return input by simply adding an AND clause to where object, and then checking the value in the key and making sure that it is not like the wildcard asterisk SQL Server agent asterisk. So when we run this, you can see now I've removed the two items here from the output so that I'm not checking something that I don't want to check. So now I've got a listing of 4 items that are stopped, and maybe I've decided, you know what, these are all services that should be running, and I need to know about it. So that's where our little function we saw earlier on the EasyMail is going to help. Down here you can see I've created the same exact syntax. Service status, get enumerator, where object, format table, and you can see that I'm returning that to a $body variable. One other little thing though, down here on the end I'm using the outString commandlet. Remember that when you're dealing with the pipeline in PowerShell, the output is either an object or a collection of objects. Well, here we don't want that. What we actually want is a single string. So what outString commandlet does for you is it takes that either object or collection of objects and converts that to a string. So this PowerShell pipeline will ultimately return a string. And we need a string so that we can pass it to our send EasyMail function that we wrote. And it's going to pass that into the body parameter. So let's run this. And you can see at the bottom it says running script selection, and now it's complete. So in just a second, I should see my email notification pop up with the email, and there we go. Let's go take a look at that. And here we go. You can see I have the names of the services that are stopped, and I have my email notification. So now I know that I need to go do something about these stopped services and maybe restart them, ensure that nothing's being affected, that kind of thing.